Is what you're going to hear about today, so you'll hear about what all that activity is. I do a bunch of other stuff, but mostly now I just track activity and development. The talk is going to be a little weird. It's not just going to be me. We're going to start with Jared, CEO of Status and founder of Logos, will come up here and give you the political motivation and why we want to do this, what led us to kind of get to this point and kind of the problems we're looking to solve. And then he's going to pass it off to me where I give a slight transition on some of the, how do we do this in terms of development? How do we make technology that conforms to this political why? And then we're going to walk through the three projects that compose the foundation of Logos, what we're starting with and why those are there. The project leads are going to give those little 5-minute round sessions on, to give you an idea, like the general idea of what these projects are, how they work, and how they align with the idea of Logos. And then we'll give it back to me and I'll wrap it up. So without further ado, Jared Hope.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming down. I really appreciate the support. It's been a busy event and there's great places to be. Let's start talking about strengthening civil liberties with politically neutral networks. You'll never know how much it costs the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you'll make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that I ever took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams, the second President of the United States. September 11, 2001, 2 planes hit the World Trade Centers. World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7, 3 buildings collapsed at the speed of gravity. And as they fell squarely onto their footprints, fear was struck into the hearts of the masses, as we witnessed our governments turn into something alien to us. And we witnessed the birth of the surveillance censorship state. But it wouldn't be until 2005 when the high courts, the public, and even Congress became aware of what had transpired. The implementation of the world's first, arguably the world's first, mass surveillance dragnet program called Stellar Wind. And we were only aware of this because of 2 great men, whistleblowers known as Thomas Tam and Thomas Drake. But it would take up until 2013 to realize that there was no reform, there was no action. In fact, the complete opposite happened. What Stellar Wind offered was a new legal framework which justified the expansion of the prison program, a more expansive mass surveillance program targeting the citizens of the states. Snowden would go on to say that the freedom of the country can only be measured by its respect for the rights of its citizens. And it's my conviction that these rights are in fact limitations on state power that define exactly where and when the government may not infringe onto the domain of personal or individual freedoms that during the American Revolution was called liberty, and during the Internet Revolution is called privacy. Thomas Drake would go on to say that the United States unchained itself fully from its Constitution, and that we, the people, are still not fully aware of this. It is an alien form of government and completely anathema to our democracies. It is conduct of crime against the sovereignty of who we as the people, capital W, capital P. And as the US does, the rest of the world follows. Authoritarian states took this as an excuse to implement their own mass surveillance programs against their citizens. But perhaps more alarmingly, our Western liberal democracies, the Five Eyes, also followed suit, with the United Kingdom's taking this further than anyone else had ever done, and it even went as far as to enshrining this into law. The world had become enveloped in surveillance. These programs continue to go on today. Through FISA Section 702, we are aware of 2 mass surveillance programs. One is PRISM, which works with big tech companies such as Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, and it consumes all of the information that goes through that. Every message that you've sent, every email that you've done, what you've posted about your life is now at the hands of them. They also have another program called Upstream, which is similar, but is applied to telecommunications and working in conjunction with companies such as AT&T and Verizon. We see an extension of this same logic in the UK recently with the Online Safety Bill, a means or an attempt to effectively end end-to-end encryption. Not even the contents that you send to your loved ones is safe. And of course, I'm Australian, and in Australia we beat you this already, beat everybody by this by enshrining the anti-encryption bill back in sort of 2018. And we now even have our own Online Safety Act. Now, mass surveillance might not seem so bad to you at this stage, or you might not really understand the underlying problem that this provides our democracies. But Glenn Greenwald said it probably the best. The capacity for this agency to spy on people and to know everything they do is so extreme and awesome that at any moment, pure totalitarianism can be imposed on the American people, and they would have no place to hide. And even though he was speaking about the United States, we now know this applies to almost everybody in the developed world. Think about it. If I know everything that you do, everything you think, what you fear, and what you love, and you know nothing about me, then I have a tremendous amount of power over you. I can psychologically manipulate you, I can divide you as a people, I can stay many steps ahead of what you're planning and what you're thinking. And this is the underlying problem, this massive and growing power gap between the powerful and the powerless. Thomas Drake put it more succinctly. He said, they simply want to own you. That's a power relationship of superior and inferior. And we don't need central bank digital currencies to understand how political dissidents are treated, those who rise up and express a difference of opinion towards how the regime is acting. The list is great and long, and regardless of how you think or what your opinions are of their political beliefs, we cannot have a functioning democracy that operates this way. These people have been economically exiled in one shape or form, whether it's their bank accounts being closed, their payment systems such as PayPal refusing service, and CBDCs is just an extension of this same logic. The problem with this is it also goes to the highest levels of our world governments. With the IMF, they are also considering doing a CBDC. If you say a mean tweet or you show any form of political dissidence or you participate in the democratic system, you face being economically locked out. And of course, the economy happens in spite of the state. And today, CBDCs are poised, also like mass surveillance, to envelop the world. This is particularly concerning because we can also see this reflected in the rise of authoritarianism. The Freedom House Index has shown consistently for nearly the past 2 decades that freedom around the world has been declining. And perhaps worse, the United States, the last bastion of freedom on the planet, has been following a similar trend. Closer to our industry, closer to home, we've also, in this last year, we've also seen new attacks on crypto, whether it is the sanctioning of open source technology, the unwarranted and unfounded persecution of programmers, or the economic blockades, which is being called Operation Choke Point 2.0. Now, this has led to a cooling effect and coercion of people who secure our networks, resulting in what has been known to be transaction censorship. And while these attacks today have been relatively benign and our systems have recovered, we have to think about the future and what these attacks will evolve into. It's been 20 years since the public became aware of stellar wind, yet we have seen no sign of reform, no change in our governance. In fact, this same idea has been progressing and expanding. I'm afraid that reform is not coming, and the question is, what do we do? Perhaps we need an act of civil disobedience, the highest expression of the law, the highest expression of democracy. And the question becomes, well, how do we go about this? We can cast ourselves back to the last protests against the financial elites, both in Occupy Wall Street and the rise of Bitcoin. These are 2 expressions of protest which can be viewed under the Albert Hirschman's ultimatum, exit, voice, and loyalty. In Voice, we saw Occupy Wall Street, but this led to one of the co-founders, Mika White, writing a book of admission that protest or voice no longer works. The cost of voice is so high and the rewards are so low. Our states are no longer listening to the people. Yet Bitcoin spawned an entire industry, showed it could operate in a hostile environment. It showed a way of peacefully opting out. And another expression of this idea came under communist-occupied Czechoslovakia. And one of the visionary leaders of the parallel polis movement, Ivan Giris, said, if it improves impossible to legally compel the ruling power to change ways that it governs us, and if for various reasons those who reject this power cannot or do not wish to overthrow it by force, then the creation of an independent or an alternative parallel society is the only dignified solution. So where do we start? Is my contention, or what I like to posit, is that we start with our rights, particularly the set of rights that is safeguards against tyranny. That is the set of rights called civil liberties. They started in ancient Greece. In the 1600s, they were refined by John Milton, and they were eventually enshrined by Enlightenment philosophers such as Locke and Voltaire. This is freedom of speech, the capacity, and freedom of thought, the capacity to say what you think and what you believe, to have an opinion and to have that be heard. When you have this suppressed in some way, you start altering your behaviors, and then what you can and cannot think inside your own mind becomes something of a means of self-censorship. You have the panopticon in your own mind. The right to associate is the ability to create religious or political groups that allows you to oppose tyranny. And economic freedom is your autonomy in transacting with others in exchange of free goods. All of these are expressions of self-determination of a people. But what underlies civil liberties is a prerequisite concept known as political neutrality. Without political neutrality, we cannot have we have political bias within our institutions. We can't have a medium in which we're able to freely express ourselves. As soon as there's political bias that's introduced, you have a form of censorship. But perhaps it's a bit easier to see the value of neutrality at the world stage. Post-World War II, the United States government became the de facto world police, and with it, the United States dollar became enshrined as the de facto world reserve currency. Yet, since then, they have used their positioning in the world to effectively employ economic sanctions time and time again. And what this has resulted in is a road of trust and confidence within the United States dollar. And this has led to roughly 60% of the world's GDP looking for alternate routes around the US dollar. And we are now seeing 23 countries, or the rise of BRICS, and even the IMF accepting debt repayments in yuan. What I advocate for is also not new. In the early 2000s, perhaps 2003, I think it was, there was an effort to regulate packets at the internet service provider level. The defense against this was called net neutrality. It was done by great people who, like such as Tim Berners-Lee, who had advocated for, well, invented the World Wide Web, the co-creator of the IP, as well as Lawrence Lessig, the founder of the free culture movement. And today, efforts to repeal these and censor at the internet service provider level shows almost unanimous bipartisan opposition to repealing them. So this is something that the public actually cares about. And we should feel vindicated in our cause and our efforts, because the demand for freedom is universal. And time again, whether it is the Atlantic Council, the Heritage Foundation, the Fraser Institute, or the United Nations Development Program, we see that there's a strong correlation between freedom and prosperity. The World Bank's own admission in Where is the Wealth of Nations has also shown that if we can create a stronger order or a stronger rule of law, that this is actually a far larger value generator for a nation, even over natural resource extraction. And not only that, but providing an order that can secure property rights allows us to bring in 2/3 of the global population into the wide economy. We can start formalizing the shadow economy. At the moment, they're entirely locked out, and we can use the net to provide stable censorship and corruption-resistant institutions to these people. Another interesting aspect is if we can reduce transaction costs by a mere 0.1%, and when I'm talking about transaction costs here, it's in the abstract sense. So like if you go to the DMV and you're waiting in line with a bunch of people, these are all people that is effectively having an economic drain on the society because they're just standing there when they could be more productive in some sense. But if you can reduce this by 0.1%, it literally quadruples a country's wealth. This means the difference between Argentina and Switzerland. Moreover, how I view public blockchains is that they are a voluntary social order. They are a fullest expression of liberalism, and we can actually achieve express consent of the governed, both by our interactions and supporting these networks as we the people, but also in the transactions that we do with them. And we take that power away when it no longer services us. We can actually remove ourselves from those systems because they have cheap exit costs. So how do we do this? Well, the technology has come a long way, but there are still some serious issues with it. We can take our existing technologies and we can start to introduce political impartiality into the protocol by making the service providers blind. We need to make them blind both at the network level and at the transaction level. If you strip personhood from the network level, it becomes hard to identify who is talking to who. And if the service network can no longer see the contents of a transaction, such as private smart contracts, then they cannot have an opinion on what is flowing through that network. They are reduced to basically being paid to service who is willing to pay. Now, there's a flip side to doing this. If you can actually do this and introduce political neutrality, then it actually starts to imply a level of autonomy. Because if you're resistant to a coercive adversary introducing that political bias, then you're actually resistant to their sovereign claims in a sense, which I'll get to in a second. And if you do that, then you also have a notion of sovereignty in of itself. And this brings us all the way back to the early 2000s, even earlier, with John Barlow's Declaration of Independence in Cyberspace, as well as Leslie Lamport's introduction of the Paxos Protocol. You see, the United Nations and the United States around 2017 both started to recognize cyberspace as a fifth domain of conflict, next to land, sea, air, and space. And this means that there's national sovereignty recognition over partitions of cyberspace. Yet if you can challenge those assumptions, then what you're effectively doing is creating a new territory, a territory that doesn't exist in the sea or in space or in the air or land, but it exists within cyberspace. It becomes a new virtual state, a cyber state, a virtual special economic zone, or what is popularly known today as a network state. Yeah, and this is Leslie Lamport's paper where he's showing, And then with this order or this territory, we can then start to build the same governing institutions that we used to. We can make more competitive governing services. And this is also an idea that goes back to 1989. So I've talked about many other issues around this, and you're more than welcome to check out those talks because I don't want to take up too much time. And this brings us to Logos itself. It's a privacy-focused, sovereign, decentralized technology stack. It consists of 3 sub-protocols: Nomos, which is a private modular multi-chain network; Codex, which is private decentralized storage; and Waku, private peer-to-peer messaging. And with these primitives, we can start to create a new world, a new modern state. So that was the short answer. The long answer, I'm not going to read out this particular document, but to understand Logos in terms of its technology, a distributed system, is to miss the point. To view our technology as merely cryptocurrencies or digital assets is to miss the point. To use the financial or technical lens is to bring about a level of sterility, to easily miss the political implications. There is an opportunity to see that this technology represents a new social order, an inversion on the logic of violence, a diffusion of powers, a means, a counter, a pattern of reactionary thought to mass surveillance, big tech censorship, and the present future of economic exile. We, that is crypto, are constructing a new political system and ushering in a new epoch. An epoch as great and as transformative as the Renaissance, the Age of Discovery, the scientific revolution, the cartographic revolution, the printing revolution, the Enlightenment, the Romantic era, the German philosophical revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and the Age of Information. Logos is a recognition that something is deeply wrong in Western society. The rise of authoritarianism, the erosion of trust in governance, the rampant inflation, atomization of the individual, and insidious culture wars. It is an antithesis to the managerial state, a just and legitimate alternative to technocracy. I speak of the realization of a latent cypherpunk dream, one that was seen by the likes of Leslie Lamport, John Barlow, Jerry Everett, and even Hakim Bey. I speak of the creation of what's been called a cyber state, a virtual state, and more recently, a network state. A digital Switzerland, a pirate utopia, a virtual special economic zone, a parallel society, a means of peacefully opting out. This is an idea whose time has come and can now practically be implemented, at least in proof of concept. Like the young and ambitious political entrepreneurs of the American project, we can build a startup society that holds real political currency, if only we are so bold to see it as such, and brave enough to accept it and stand up. It is a means of competitive governance that can support, if not replace, our aging Westphalian states. Thomas Jefferson said, "When the governments fear the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny." The infrastructure and capacity for an unprecedented technological tyranny is in place. We are living on borrowed time. These policies and methods are not popular, yet what choice will the people have if our states know everything that we love and fear, what we're thinking, where we are, what we're planning for our every move, capable of psychologically manipulating us and dividing us? Reform is the ideal solution, but what if reform never comes? Like frogs in boiling water, how much longer should we wait? Public programmable blockchains are more than a distributed data store. They're more than an append-only log. They're more than a money idol, false god, an altar for degenerate behavior. They're a social and political technology, one that's proven to operate and maintain integrity in hostile environments. They're a means of voluntary social order. They're an expression of we are the people. They're an expression of the consent of the governed. They're a diffusion of power, a holder of strong property rights. This order is ubiquitous. It exists everywhere and nowhere. An order with cheap exit costs only retains power as long as they provide useful service. They represent a will of the people. Through forks, they support ideological rifts, and through transactions, they're a means of express consent. On top of this order, we can develop sound money. We can escape debt slavery. We can deploy competitive, censorship-resistant, and corruption-resistant institutions that can be spread and accessed across the world. We can have a plurality of governing services. We can have auto-centric law. We can enter into policies tailored for us rather than for the many. They have given us a taste of economic freedom as well as personal responsibility that comes with it. And if we strip personhood from the network participation and obfuscate the contents of transactions, we can make these networks politically neutral. And with that political neutrality, we can extend the freedom to bolster civil liberties, to the safeguarding rights of tyranny. This political neutrality implies a defense against coercion, against the introduction of political bias into the system, and with that implication, we get a stronger notion of autonomy, maybe in as far as sovereignty. This sovereignty doesn't rely on geopolitical boundaries, but rather denotes a new kind of territorialization in cyberspace, one that passively challenges key aspects of national sovereignty claims. Of course, a politically neutral system upheld by the people isn't inherently politically neutral. It requires a new constitution, a new culture, a resurgence of virtue, a cross-cultural morality and ethics, a real understanding of human universals, and it needs to be made for a high-trust society. It'll require a new ideology, a rethinking of liberalism, as its fundamental assumptions have proven to be false, while achieving their legitimacy as a fuller expression under liberalism's ideals. In the least, this is applied to the ones who create and maintain the system, a shared collective narrative that we must participate in. I'm nearly done. Logos. Logos, the divine wisdom manifest in creation, government, and the redemption of the world. Aristotle understood logos as reason and rationality, especially in the ethical sense. Yet logos has many meanings, the most important of them being word, statement, story, thought, principle, reason, and speech. Heraclitus asserted that you can't step into the same river twice, since everything constantly changes. However, what we perceive as unchangeable is the principle that underlies these ideas and change. This principle is logos. The world is a collection of unified things that are structured and arranged by logos. Human wisdom is tasked with understanding this principle, as all of our actions depend on participation in the divinity of logos. Logos is beyond words, but at the same time marking the power of words and human expression. Logos is synonymous with the Tao. Nomos is the personified spirit, a demon of law. Nomos is the animated law spirit within us, a habit or custom of social political behavior. It is the concrete order of a people, taking place through a continual threefold cycle between a set of three principles, which comes to be read onto society by individuals through externalization and objectivization, as well as the internalization in each individual, and thus becomes to assumed, spoken of, and placed into social discourse, to be treated as common sense. The most important function of society is nomization. It is a shield against terror. Nomos provides us with a stability, predictability, a frame of reference in which to live. Waku. Waku, to well up, to gush forth, to spring out, to surge, to feel emotions form. A nod to the Japanese pirates, the marginal men living in political unstable areas without national allegiances. Waku is the freedom of information to flow, for your voice to be heard and to be felt. Codex. History is a terrain in which power and hierarchies shape the contestation of multiple accounts of the past, and within that, the content, the existence of, and access to the archives and libraries becomes crucial. As Jacques Derrida put it, there is no political power without control of the archive, if not memory. Effective democratization can always be measured by this essential criterion, the participation in and access to the archive, its constitution, and its interpretation. Or as George Orwell put it, he who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. Codex is the safeguard of a people becoming emancipated from their culture, of their histories of being distorted or erased. Codex represents the means in which access to the archive becomes durable and democratized. And that's what Logos is. It's an experiment, it's a proof of concept in the design of a new political system, a new state for the modern world. Thank you.
So I'd venture a guess that because you're here, at least part of that you resonate with, and judging by the claps, a lot of you resonate with it quite a lot. I'm here to try and take that, the political motivation, the why, what we're trying to stop, and create things that are resistant from capture. And how do we transfer that to technology? How do we build technology that allows us to build these things in a way that aligns with these principles that we all clearly agree with? And I'm going to take a slight detour before we go through the projects technically and how they work with this concept that kind of underpins all of them. And that is the medium is the message. I've always said this in most of my talks, and it means the same thing. It's the medium we use has a very strong bias on the message that's received. The pipes we use to send information transforms that information, and if we aren't careful, it transforms it too much in such a way that the message is severely skewed or manipulated or even stopped altogether, right? And so what we're trying to do overall, and a lot of these things that underpins all of this, is change the infrastructure, the foundation that we build upon, to remove as much of our bias on the medium such that the message can get through, or the people who create things craft the appropriate medium for the messages they're trying to send. We're trying to make human relationships that are closer to real life relationships and aren't altered by the technology we use to engage in them, right? And this graphic is a wonderful graphic that was made by Monica here that kind of depicts this idea of how the internet works today. We have this beautiful diversity of creativity and different people and ideals and groups of people that want to do different things together. And in the process of communicating, we kind of put ourselves through the meat grinder on the internet. We all come out as these NPCs on the bottom. We've removed our ability to express ourselves in all the different ways we want to, because the internet doesn't allow us to do it in the way it's built today. So a common infrastructure that we'd like to have that can make things that appeal to these ideals, it removes bias from the medium. It removes the meat grinder. It allows us to create things that allow us to gather and cultivate these differences and diversities and things we want to do, and opt out, if we don't like what we're doing, into a different one that's better for us. So, as you go through these projects, you're going to see a couple themes that go through all of them. How do we remove our bias from the medium, such that people can actually have real messages with the people they're talking to? And that's privacy and efficiency. You need both of these things deeply in the infrastructure in order to build anything on top of it that allows us to have these things. Privacy, why? Anytime that you remove privacy, you're either adding a constraint or a bias or leaking information that someone can use to change, right? So at the base layer, we would like it to be as agnostic and free from constraints as possible. That's privacy. We don't want to be able to know what's going on or give information or have things altered in such a way that we're constrained by those alterations as we build things on top. Privacy is the only way to do that. Efficiency is for reach. We need this to be as inclusive and widespread as possible. The internet works for all of us. It's changed all our lives. Why? Because it's efficient. But it's efficient in ways that aren't the way we like them to be. In order to build these things with privacy, they also need to be efficient in that everyone can participate and not be relegated to those who can participate, who can then alter the medium, change the message. So looking back at this, you're going to go through these 3 projects under Logos, Nomos, Codex, and Waku. We're going to do it in the opposite order, starting with Waku and Hano.
Hi, I am Hanu. I am from Waku. I'll be giving a very brief introduction of what Waku is, for those who don't know yet. Shame. So Waku really is this infrastructure project that builds the messaging pillar of privacy-preserving Web3 infrastructure. And those of you who might remember Whisper might know that this is the spiritual descendant of Whisper, with many, many changes. And as such, Waku operates as a set or a suite of protocols that aims to provide privacy-preserving peer-to-peer communications. And, well, if we are speaking about politically neutral infrastructure, we have to recognize that we need to operate, our protocols need to operate within environments that might potentially be very, very hostile, where we have to deal with very powerful adversaries, such as global passive adversaries. This came out very beautifully in the earlier talks that Waku gave. And really, Waku thinks about what is needed for peer-to-peer communications. How can we build it in a way that we don't compromise on privacy and security? So we think of features such as sender anonymity, receiver anonymity, metadata protection, unlinkability of messages to any identity. We also try and provide for applications building on top of Waku some easy features that they can incorporate to provide conversational security, key exchange mechanisms, encryption. So that's privacy preservation. We've been speaking a lot about decentralization. Another thing that came out in the talk earlier today was this is not the only thing, but this is the first step towards censorship resistance, is decentralization in the network. I will be expanding a little bit more on the modularity later on, but basically it boils down to the fact that we want our protocols to work in a wide variety of environments, in a wide variety of contexts. Why is this important? Of course, if you speak about neutrality, you also need to speak about openness. If you have any kind of bias towards a specific environment, you have a type of bias built into the network. We really want to be useful as widely as possible. And lastly, it's generalized messaging. I think this is a very important point. We also don't have any bias towards particular application of messaging. So, in other words, it could be human-to-human communication, machine-to-machine, or human-to-machine, any combination. I think a last important point about messaging, also just to kind of differentiate it a little bit from what you will hear from Nomos and Codex, is when we speak about messaging, we really speak about some kind of ephemerality in the network, so we don't have the same kind of durability or persistence requirements that you will have in a decentralized storage and in a consensus layer. And this is really how we are designing Waku and with these kind of features in mind. Yeah, this is just an example of a subset of the protocols that we have. Really, the heart of our protocols is this one in the middle, which is called WACU Relay. This describes routing. So, of course, the main thing you want to do is you want to get the message in the peer-to-peer network to everyone interested in that network. This is described by WACU Relay. This is basically just built on Le Peer-to-Peer Gossip Sub. Many of you might know about this, with a couple of privacy and security considerations added to that. And on top of this, we have several service protocols, again, focused on all the different use cases and environments. We have Store, which is for historical message storage. It introduces a type of memory in the network. And then we have Filter and Light Push, which are focused on resource-restricted devices. Again, relates to the fact that we want our protocols to be runnable in the widest set of environments possible. Of course, this needs to be built on a very strong discovery domain, several discovery protocols, because you need to be able to discover a rich and very diverse set of connections to maintain healthy connectivity in any peer-to-peer network. I promise I'll get back to this. So these protocols are modular. So you can, based on your application and based on your resource availability, maybe your motivations, pick and choose from these protocols, configure them in a way that really makes sense for your use case, your environment. And end up with a WACU network topology that might look something like this, extremely simplified, but where you really have a variety of nodes, different resource profiles, all communicating together in a privacy-preserving manner, with no bias or centralization taking place in the network. Again, this is about a neutrality towards use cases and resource availability in the network. Just as an example of hard problems that we have to solve in a privacy-preserving manner, those who came to the earlier talk might have heard about this. The issue of spam protection. Spam protection is a very difficult problem to solve, even in centralized use cases. I would say it's exponentially more difficult to do in peer-to-peer use cases, and even more difficult to do in a privacy-preserving manner in a peer-to-peer use case. So we've been working very hard, and when I say we, there are some members in the audience who've been working very, very hard on this, on a concept called RLN, rate limiting nullifiers, also in collaboration with the Privacy and Scaling Explorations Group of EF. And basically what it does is it adds a layer on top of Relay, our routing protocol, and ensures that a certain pre-agreed rate limit of publishing to the network is not exceeded. So if you want to publish to the network, you have to register a membership in a contract, potentially lock away some kind of stake, whether financial, whether a reputation. And then every time you publish to the network, a node would have to attach a zero-knowledge proof, which does not divulge any identity about this node, that basically proves that the node belongs to a membership set and that that node is not exceeding the rate limit of publishing to the network. And as soon as someone does try to spam the network, other nodes in the network can detect this and potentially slash this node from the network. Of course, there's a lot more to WACU than what I am able to give in a very brief overview. If you are interested, please come speak to me after the talk, speak to any one of my colleagues. They will direct you to me. You can visit any of these sites. We have several WACU clients already implemented. You can also run your own node already. We are a public goods protocol. We invite collaboration. We need the community. And I would invite everyone to participate.
Up next, we're going to have Jesse from Codex talk about durable data.
All right, thanks everybody. Hi, I'm Jesse, and I'm program manager of Logos. I work closely with Codex, and therefore I'm giving this presentation on it. So what is Codex? So Codex is a decentralized storage solution that provides efficient data durability. And so what is that? So data durability, efficient data durability consists of these four features. We have erasure coding and dispersal, repair, remote auditing, and incentives. And the combination of these four give what is known as efficient data durability. Now to dive into like the first feature, we have what is erasure coding and dispersal. So Erasure coding and dispersal is essentially this method in which we try and extend the data, chunk it, and then extend the data in order to reduce the total network storage required for that initial data set that you try to upload. So what this looks like in practice is when you look at a decentralized storage solution that uses naive replication, you have something like this where if you have full copies, you have 4 full copies of the initial data set that's 1 terabyte, you incur essentially 4 terabytes of total network storage that's needed. When you use something like erasure coding, you reduce that by 50%. So in this case, we show here that same 1 terabyte data set extends to only requiring 2 terabytes of network storage. So you can see in terms of efficiency for not only retrieval and reconstruction with the option of encryption contributing towards better plausible deniability of storage providers hosting files, this is the superior solution. To the next feature that Codex provides, incentives. So what are they? So Codex has what we call a marketplace, which is essentially a series of smart contracts that comes together in order to give storage providers a place to offer their storage up for users to use and for clients, the users, in order for them to actually bid on that storage, that available storage. So the third feature, remote auditing, is this method in which that we use recursive ZK proofs in order to subsample unique chunks that are stored within each storage provider that's hosting that initial data set. And what we do is we do some ZK magic in order to do the actual proof compression into that single proof, which is able to be used by a range of devices, and we're hoping to target low resource ones similar to Raspberry Pi. So in this vein, contributing towards the ability for everybody to participate in the Codex network, we hope to provide some solution that offers this feature. When it comes to repair, right, so this is the fourth feature. So all of these together are very necessary for us to actually have the result of efficient data durability. So with repair, with efficient automated repair, this mechanism is a way for us to ensure data integrity and a way to overall conserve the amount of data and bandwidth that's necessary to actually reconstruct missing sectors within the unique chunks that each storage provider has to store. So going back to the example of the decentralized storage solution that's using naive duplication, if any part of one of those 4 copies was missing or corrupt, what they would end up having to do is re-download that whole file, right, which is 1 terabyte. Now when it comes to using erasure coding and the repair associated with that, when you identify that you have a missing or corrupt sector, what you can end up doing is just reconstruct those missing sectors based on a subsampling of chunks that are available from other storage providers in a given contract. And so in this way, we help you conserve on the data and the bandwidth required for reconstruction. And so if you want to learn more about the state of Codex, we have our website right there at the top, codex.storage. We have our blog posts where Leo, who gave a presentation earlier, which was the extended version, actually does some quick write-ups that simplify some of the features and some of the high-level details, but gives you a more technical view. And then we also have the actual GitHub code repositories where you can actually download and take NIM Codex for a spin. And that's it. Thank you.
So as a side note, I hope you're paying attention. We're going to be giving away a DApp node later, and part of that giveaway process is somewhat of a quiz on a lot of this. So keep paying attention to get that DApp node.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so I'm Alvaro Castro, and I'm gonna talk about Nomos. Nomos is a blockchain. It's a blockchain focused on privacy, sovereignty, with a modular architecture. So you may ask, why do we need another L1, right? Well, there is a number of features that make us particularly unique and interesting, considering the landscape of layer ones that are currently available. So the first would be a modular architecture. Why do we need a modular architecture? Well, actually, there are L1s with modular architecture. It's a new trend mainly for decentralization. that is true, right? Like Ethereum or Celestia. Our focus is particularly on having many nodes. That's our measure of decentralization, plus having low node requirements, meaning that you can run that from home with commodity hardware. Of all the measures of decentralization, it's a long topic, but that actually matters because it's the foundation where we can build everything else. So we want to do this by, while still providing a large amount of transactions. So modularity is the best approach that we know so far. The next feature, the next pillar of our design is to provide sovereignty. What does that mean? That means that communities can start as a contract, and they can progressively turn into and incrementally become more independent on the way they store their data and the way they interpret their data. That's key. They can even eventually fork into a new chain. And this is all in protocol, meaning that we support this with a series of protocols to evolve from one state to another state. This is, as you can imagine, essential for the creation of a network state in which like, the diversity of opinion is fundamental that we support at the protocol level. The next feature is adaptability or flexibility. Basically has to do with all the things that my colleagues have been talking about before from different angles, from blockchain perspective. Basically is the communities which we power through what we call execution zones, which are like higher layers. I'll show later about them. They are actually able to select or choose within a range of trade-offs because there is no free lunch. If we provide decentralization, we need to sacrifice on something, but what, right? So we give a wide range of possibilities for the communities to choose what they want. I will dive into that a little bit deeper later, but basically that's the idea. It's a trade-off between privacy, performance, security. And finally, a very important one that we've been discussing before as well is privacy. But what distinguishes Nomos from other L1s is that, even private L1s, is that we aim at providing privacy at the level of validators, at the infrastructure level, and also at the level of transactions and users. So we opened a new design space for contracts, and including like hybrid smart contracts, so ranging from like full privacy or as full as it's possible. It's a very complex and big topic that we are starting to actually understand, to like completely open. So the space of possibilities for new applications is enormous and is underexplored. We are used to everything in contracts is open. So a brief overview of the architecture. So as I said, it's modular architecture, right? And this is like a new trend in order to support the decentralization while also providing high performance. But in our case, we're doing this with full node level privacy of the stakers, privacy of the delegators, network level privacy. This is a lot of complex protocols, all of them working in unison because data leaks and privacy leaks are very easy to just that they're produced. So our base layer is providing data availability and consensus, data ordering, meaning that it doesn't interpret data, it leaves the data interpretation to what we call the execution zones, which are these communities that I was talking about that allow for further sovereignty and independence down the line, if they choose to. And in between, the coordination layer provides the minimum amount of computation that needs to be performed by every node to secure the network. When I discuss this idea of incremental sovereignty, well, this is just a simplification, a simple representation of it. When we start with a contract, then the contract can become an execution zone, which is akin to rollups, but also sidechains, sovereign rollups. It's a complex topic. We're still trying to understand as a community in blockchain what a rollup is. It's a bridge. It's all a bridge. But so that we call it execution zones, right? And execution zones, as we'll see later, have the ability to choose among certain properties. And eventually can become a new chain. We can see that what we are actually designing is an architecture that sits in between Cosmos and Ethereum. Furthermore, it's kind of like a generalization over both of them, because you can progressively become from like a contract to a roll-up, and then you can become an independent, an app chain. They can communicate through IBC, a protocol that is agnostic, and they can even be completely independent. I was also talking about the idea of adaptability and flexibility. This is very important because we cannot lock certain properties, features that are very, very relevant in certain use cases. So we developed this consensus algorithm that provides elastic scalability. It's one of the most interesting innovations that our team has already achieved. And basically, what it provides is the ability that the same algorithm will adapt to having a small set of nodes, and then it will operate similarly to hot stuff, which is one of the highest performing consensus protocols. But as the set of validators grows, you start forming this structure that you can see here, this hierarchical, and it will actually favor decentralization. So the same consensus algorithm can seamlessly provide decentralization to the base layer. There is a large number of nodes at the cost of some latency, but that is okay because we are providing high security and decentralization. And then execution zones are able to choose what level of decentralization, centralization they want in order to enable things like very advanced privacy-enhancing technologies, which require the use of very few nodes and could hard decentralization, or high-performance applications. So the flexibility is key in order to enable all these options. And finally, I was talking about privacy. This is a very deep topic, and well, these are like words, fancy words that everybody's talking about, like zero knowledge proofs, fully homomorphic encryption. It seems like it means nothing because it means everything, right? Well, we've explored this deeply, and what we know is that zero knowledge proofs only provides user-level privacy. It's just the first layer of what we can do in the future for privacy. There is a whole world of unexplored technologies still like at the edge of what is possible, like threshold fully homomorphic encryption, which are actually necessary in order to achieve multi-user privacy, like privacy between people, two or many or more. That is not as simple as it seems, well, as it could like sound from the name zero knowledge proof that you could achieve that, right? And in the future, like there are like the pipe dream would be provable fully homomorphic encryption, where like you have this fully homomorphic encryption in which like everybody computes, nobody sees anything, everything is private. You have all the users being able to privately compute, and then you can actually prove that on top of a very decentralized base layer. But that's a dream for now, and we will work towards it. Moreover, we can actually support it with this architecture, which is the whole point. And well, that's about it. It's a very large and complex project, as you can see. But we already own it, and the first focus is the base layer. So we have already a couple of papers. The kernel paper, which is the most important, describing how this elastic protocol works. It's a draft, and it will be published soon. The white papers are coming in a month or two, and we have code already for you to check. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, so that's the three main projects that we have that can comprise Logos. And they're all in various development stages, from production, getting out and getting clients and being used by various people here, to close to MVP, racing the market, doing a bunch of tests, to in the early research phase and defining exactly how that architecture works and exactly the mechanisms in which we do this type of privacy. Once again, a backdrop to all of this, a theme that we have throughout all of this that allows us to try and build the future that Jared showed you, is privacy and efficiency. And you need to think about that and always think about that if you align with those principles and want to build the same thing. But that's not all we do. So that you saw the first three. We also do VAC. So VAC is our deep research group that provides a bunch of services throughout all the projects that we have today and the projects that we'll have tomorrow. And they serve a couple different functions outside of deep research. It's a research entity dedicated towards public goods, which means that we need to build things that exists in the event that we don't. So you do that through openness. You need to build open protocols, build everything in the open and open source, build specifications that are as agnostic as possible, such that you can use it in a different way if that's the way you'd like to use it. And as an organization, we take those open protocols and share them with the world and hopefully grow them with a broader community and build products out of them based on how we think they should be used. And so that's kind of the idea of how you do development in the open while building things that can push the science in the most generalized way with as little bias, while also building products and companies that are profitable and make money and are sustainable. And we also have a couple groups of specialized service units that provide these services to the various things, which also do research and help push the science. That's token engineering, smart contract development, cryptography, secure messaging, distributed systems testing, because you need to make sure that these things work in real life scenarios doing simulations before you have any confidence that you can make a product out of them, peer-to-peer networking, and zero knowledge. So we try and keep track of what's going on throughout the ecosystem, do research, share with others, and try and push the science forward. And once again, this is an experiment. We're trying to do something based on an ideology we think is important to solve problems we are really worried about. That's what Logos is. And we are doing this by experimentation through implementation and collaboration. So it's an open invitation to share a new narrative that we painted and we think you all believe because you're here. So please join us in any way that you feel is appropriate or you know how to. Contact us if you're interested, and you can talk to me, anybody with one of these shirts on, any of the sites you've seen, and we're happy to try and figure out a good way to collaborate and push this forward. Thank you. And if you don't, keep fighting. How much time do we have? We can do some questions. Hands? Who's got the mic? Somebody's got a mic. You can take my mic. Here, just take your mic.
Hi, thank you so much. It was great talks. Okay, no. I guess I have a question. So I've really enjoyed your presentation, but I've missed the first part of it. I'm very sorry. So if my question is irrelevant, please let me know. I really like this approach and advocating for privacy security. Although I can't say I wasn't triggered by the examples. It's giving, like, white men are trying to explain to me that my privacy, security, and safety is at risk, and the narrative of that we should start from our rights. It's interesting because we've been having conversations with people from the space that don't need convincing that their privacy is at stake. And I love Nathan Schneider's book. Like, don't get me wrong, I love like the movement of Occupy the Wall Street. But have you mentioned like the protests in Iran, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Russia, in Venezuela? We're talking about creating an environment that would foster equality, that would fight information asymmetry, that would advocate for underrepresented people. Yet what I'm seeing in the space, it still works for, you know, people from like North America and EU, which is not wrong, but like the examples that you're using, again, maybe perhaps you've used them in the first part of your conversation, I just missed it, and I'm just, you know, expressing all the anger for nothing. But I would really appreciate that it would be, you know, acknowledged. And also perhaps the interesting perspective, like I get it, that you say that we should start from our freedom and from our rights. What about people who don't have rights, or they live in countries where their rights are so compromised that it feels like they should reach first that stage of where they are able to claim or at least voice their concerns. And I guess this is like a hypothetical question. I don't really understand how, you know, empowering people who already have power would help people who are underrepresented, or protesting in Paris. I don't really understand how that empowers the people, women in Iran, but that's perhaps my ignorance, I don't know. So perhaps what I would appreciate, which I love the message, like I really love it, really stand by that. It's perhaps maybe a bit more diverse perspective, but that's just my perspective. I'm extremely sorry. I don't want it to piss on your parade. It's great. Like,
Yeah, no.
but yeah.
Testing. Yeah, I mean, no, you're absolutely right. Like, there's definitely underrepresented people out there that do not even have a concept of civil liberties in many ways. Like I was trying to express, it is like a sort of Western tradition, but that shouldn't prevent them from accessing it, right? Like, in previous talks that I've given, like I've talking about the case of Rojava and the Kurdish, right? They are trying to set up a democracy in the caliphate of ISIS, yet they're being bombed by the Turkish from the north, and like they have to deal with, you know, terrorists coming from the south, right? I used to spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and I became very sympathetic towards the Kachins. These are people who actually have a declaration from the United Nations to be an independent nation since the 50s and been fighting for autonomy ever since. Yet their boundaries intersect with China, India, and with Myanmar. And they suffer from the natural resource curse, right? So the Burmese come in, take their resources, and sell it to the Chinese, and it accounts for their 40% of the GDP. But what was great about them is that they actually saw the potential in these technologies. They wanted to establish a national cryptocurrency. They wanted to build hospitals, which this currency was then used in. And what was great, all gave me like a lot of faith or hope for like these technologies being able to be spread across the world, was that they were also used to using WeChat just because they had this intersection with China. So they had access to a super app and they were transacting through it. So there are regions on the planet which do not have stable institutions and can access the net through resource-restricted devices. And okay, it doesn't solve all of the world's problems, but at least we can start there. The other reason why I talk about the states is because they are the largest adversary, right? It is the biggest problem, and as they do, the rest of the world follows, right? So maybe that's not a satisfactory answer to you. I guess another way to look at it is that there are old white men that came along and created a huge cage around us, and the younger white men are trying to break us out of it.
I love the message, and even if it comes from like just the acknowledging privilege, because you've mentioned, you know, having political bias, having, you know, but the thing is like even having a bank account, having a citizenship, having a place to live, and like ability to travel, speak, and read. This is like, you know, it's a privilege that we rarely acknowledge even in the blockchain space. And I guess my wish is that, you know, some of the examples were a bit more diverse. Other than that, great, thank you so much. And again, I'm very sorry, I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I really like the talk.
Not at all, thanks.
Thank you for voicing that. Other questions, comments, concerns?
All concerns.
All right, well, if you have questions later, you can find us, or you want to talk to us. We're all here.
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay, great.
I mean, like, show of hands. How many of you know why the protests in France happened just now? Okay, not that bad, but kind of bad. How many women are wearing a Logos t-shirt right now? I think like 3. I don't know how many people in the team have grassroots political activism or related experience. Yeah, I know, we've spoken before, but so yeah, that kind of worries me.
So should I quit?
Huh?
Should I quit?
No, fucking no.
Well, we're doing the best we can with what we have, and the more of a voice we have, and the more actionable things we can do, the better representation we can get to.
How many groups, anonymized, no specifics, are you speaking that have these needs with right now?
I mean, the other thing is like, we do all of this completely in the open, right? Everything that we do is public. So there's no barriers for participation. Of course, we can do better at encouraging it, but this is literally the first day that we even began talking about it, right? So we certainly hire like anyone who's capable of doing their jobs, and we encourage anyone to become part of this. Like, we want to build this with other people. We have open research topics and questions that we need to discuss in public, and anyone's invited to come and participate in that.
Well, disclaimer, I'm a fan though anyway, but
I don't understand why people are taking the microphone and being hypercritical, so I want to be here as a, my family is from Iran, but I was born in America, and I think what you guys are doing is amazing, and fully support it, so thank you, and please help.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, come find us. We're here to chat. Thank you.